Hopefully we've got audio for it as well. I'm just going to play this.
The prefrontal cortex, PFC, is the cerebral cortex which covers the frontal part of the frontal lobe, the brain region that's been implicated in planning complex cognitive behaviours or personality expression, decision-making and moderating social behaviour. The basic activity of the brain region is considered to be an orchestration of thoughts and actions in accordance with internal goals. The most typical psychological term for functions carried out by the prefrontal cortex area is executive function. Executive function relates to the abilities to differentiate among conflicting thoughts, determine good and bad, better and best, same and different, future consequences of current activities, working toward a defined goal, prediction of outcomes, expectations based on actions, and social control. That is, the ability to suppress urges that, if not suppressed, could lead to socially unacceptable outcomes. The frontal cortex supports concrete rule learning, while more anterior regions along the rostral caudal axis of the frontal cortex support rule learning at a higher level of abstraction.
Okay, so I'm not sure everybody wanted to hear that okay, but basically what I was saying is your prefrontal cortex is what controls your executive function. And executive function is things like your ability to ordination, so to do tasks in order, your ability to tell sometimes right from wrong, your ability to judge time, your impulse control. All these kind of things are controlled by your prefrontal cortex. These images are currently on the slides is the differences between somebody with ADHD, their prefrontal cortex, and somebody who's neurotypical. So the glowing areas are where there is differences in mass. So what it's showing is somebody who has ADHD, the mass of their prefrontal cortex is much less than somebody who's neurotypical. Essentially, during their development, the prefrontal cortex, that part of the brain, doesn't grow at the same rate as anybody else. So what we end up with is your executive function is impaired. So all those things I talked about, the ability to judge time, the ability to do tasks in order, the ability to sometimes judge the outcomes of your actions or impulse control are all impaired in somebody who's got ADHD. It's not just about being hyperactive or focused. Now, it's not all bad. I love this quote, the good part about having a mental disorder is having a valid reason for all the stupid things we do because of a damaged prefrontal cortex. I would be lying if I said that I've never just gone, oh, I'm so sorry, that was my ADHD, I'm not to blame, per me. So yeah, it does give you a bit of an out sometimes. Also, your prefrontal cortex is what's actually impaired whenever you drink alcohol. So having ADHD is like being mildly drunk all the time, and not just because I'm Irish. One of the other things that your prefrontal cortex manages is dopamine. For anybody who's not heard of dopamine before, dopamine is a drug that your brain kind of secretes whenever you do something that it thinks will increase your survivability. So it's your brain's way of telling you, you rock, you did an awesome thing, keep doing that thing. So you went to the gym, or you ticked off that Jira ticket, or you did the dishes, or any of these kind of small day-to-day tasks that you want to build into good routines and to good behaviors. That's how your brain reinforces that you should be conducting these tasks, is by giving you this dopamine. And then you want more dopamine, so you keep doing the tasks, and it becomes kind of a self-perpetuating cycle. Okay, so none of that stuff's going to work for me. All of this kind of thing, my brain doesn't produce dopamine the same way. I can't really do ordination properly. So you only look at these How to Be Successful books, all these self-help books. And I've read a lot of them, and I can't find any where their conditions for success is, be flaky. Don't focus on projects. Forget what you're doing all the time. This is not things that they ever regard as something that's being successful. So I'm never going to be able to follow the advice in these books. And I'm never really going to be successful in the terms these books define. So I need to think of my own way of what I define for success. And a lot of people do this. For some people, success is your salary. How much money do you make? What's your remuneration on your job? Yes, I'm aware this is a very old meme. I'm also old. I like it. Get over it. That's fine. For some people, success might be power. They might want to climb that corporate ladder. They want to have that VP position, that executive position. They want to be able to tell people what to do. That's how they might define success. For others, hopefully, success might be, the ability to help people. They may see themselves as successful in the amount of help that they're able to grant to others. For me, I can find my water bottle. For me, basically successful is avoiding boredom. I can judge very quickly when I'm no longer being successful in my work or being productive in my work by my level of boredom. If I'm no longer engaged in what I'm doing, if I'm starting to feel bored, that's because I'm not controlling my focus properly. A little aside story about this. So whenever most people here are probably tech or like tech adjacent, you probably know most of the time you start at a company, the first thing they do is like give you a t-shirt or like give you a hoodie or whatever. I used to change jobs so often because of my ADHD and my boredom that my friends used to joke that I just must really dislike clothes shopping, because the second the t-shirt got tatty, I just go get another job, you know. Big shout out to Indexmo, they're smart. They give me 2 new hoodies every year, so I don't need job shopping just yet. But for me, avoiding boredom is the big thing. If I feel engaged in what I'm doing, then I know that I'm keeping my focus where it should be, and that's allowing me to be successful. So Cal Newport wrote a book about focus. It's a book that I've read, no, I haven't read, sorry, I've skimmed. I have ADHD, sometimes it's difficult to finish these things. So the book's called Deep Work, Rules for Focused Success in a Distracted World. And one of my key takeaways from it was this equation. So Carl talks about this high quality work. You know, so I've got a W on that side of the equation. So high quality work, he says, is a product of time times intensity of focus. So if you want to increase the amount of work that you produce, the amount of high quality work you produce, you either need to increase your time or increase your intensity of focus. Now, time's kind of fixed, you know. We have 24 hours in a day. We can't work all of them. We also can't get any more hours from anywhere else. You know, sometimes we might go, okay, we're going to work a little bit overtime. We're going to like do that crunch period so we can increase that T part of the equation. I'll talk a bit later about why that's not a good idea, but let's just say like T is fixed. We can't get any new time from anywhere. So the only way we can increase the W is by increasing our intensity of focus. And it's one of the things I hear when people talk about ADHD. You know, the term is wrong as far as I'm concerned. You know, it's attention deficit. That's bullshit. I don't have a deficit of attention. If anything, I've got way too much attention. You know, and sometimes that attention is scattered over 101 different things and I get nothing done. Other times I manage to focus, but I focus all my attention on the wrong thing. You know, instead of the work I'm supposed to be doing and the deadline I'm supposed to be meeting, I spend 8 hours writing the world's best researched Reddit comment, which gets 2 upvotes. So managing the focus is probably the most difficult thing for me. Not actually finding the attention to work on things, is ensuring that the attention I do have is focused in the correct area. And sometimes trying to manage that attention and focus it where it is, it starts burning spoons. People are not aware of the spoons analogy. It actually comes from people with chronic pain, is where I first heard it. And it's this idea that every morning you have a bunch of spoons. You know, you've got a fixed number of spoons that you have every morning. And every time you have to perform a task, then that costs you a spoon. You know, these are like every task you do every day. Even the very small tasks. You know, getting out of bed, that's a spoon. Having a shower, that's a spoon. Going to work, that's a spoon, etc. You know, so all of these small things you do every day, everything that takes that little bit of willpower is slowly chipping away at it. You know, and you have a finite number of spoons. Sometimes you can borrow some spoons from tomorrow, but eventually you've got to settle your books. You've got to pay that back. You can't keep borrowing them all the time. So anything that you're doing that's costing you spoons, that's not productive, is just chipping away at that willpower and not allowing you to actually achieve your aims. The other thing is creativity. You know, anybody in this room who, I don't care if you're a front-end developer, if you regard yourself as a software engineer, and if you're a product manager, any of those, all of those jobs, anything in our industry, it is a creative industry. You know, it requires creative thinking, it requires creative doing, it is a creative industry. Creative industries are not just like painting paintings, you know, writing code, all of this stuff is all a creative exercise. And creativity isn't a faucet. You can't just turn it on whenever you want to. You know, sometimes it's just not going to work for you. You know, and I used to spend a lot of time just sitting there trying to get some work done, could not turn on the creativity at all, and I would just spin my wheels, just burning spoons all the time, just going, I need to get this done, why can't I focus, why can't I just turn this creativity on? And actually what I find is if you're getting to that point where you know that it's just not working for you right now, stop. Get up, go walk the dog, you know, play some Xbox, watch a trashy TV show, whatever you need to do to get your mind out of that same destructive loop. Because what you'll find is once you get into this habit that you need to be seen to be productive all the time, it becomes self-perpetuating. And Carl Newport again has like another kind of quote about this. He calls this, in the absence of clear indicators of what it means to be productive and valuable in their jobs, many knowledge workers turn back towards an industrial indicator of productivity. What he's saying here is if you're at that stage where you can't be productive, where you can't manage your focus, you still want to look to be productive to the rest of your team. So you start doing shallow work. Now, shallow work could be things like, you write an email, you write a memo, you book another fucking meeting. You do all of these things that you think are outside indicators to everybody else in your office that you're busy, that you're working, that you're doing something, that you're accomplishing something, when really you're not. If anything, you're actually a detriment to everybody else in the office. You're booking meetings that don't need to be there. You're sending emails that they don't need to read. You're doing all of these things that really are wasting your time, they're wasting your colleagues' times, all to have the perception that you're currently working. Because we have this and it's not that people are lazy, it's not that people are trying to avoid work or they're procrastinating. We all want to be productive, we all want to get our work done. It's a conditioned response. We feel that if we don't always appear to be busy, that if we are taking some time to ourselves, to allow ourselves to reset, that we're going to look as if we're letting the team down. And that's something that's endemic throughout our entire industry. So this is a quote from Nathan Hubbard, a tweet by Nathan Hubbard. Nathan Hubbard is a Stanford-educated businessman. He was a VP at Twitter. He's a CEO of Ticketmaster. This is a respected businessman. He's at the pinnacle of his career. And this is the advice he's giving. So this was written just before, around Christmas time, 2017. He goes, whatever you're hustling for, take note. Most companies are shut down until 2018. So he's saying, this is Christmas. Everybody else is closed up for the rest of the year, until the new year, until 2018. That means you get 2 extra weeks to outwork your competition. That's 3.8% more time. For perspective, Usain Bolt won his gold medals running 1.2% faster. These 2 weeks are a gift. Get to work. It's fucking Christmas, dude. Give people a break. This is how bad it's got, that we need to be seen to be productive all the time, that you can't even stop for 2 weeks over Christmas. This is not what we should be aiming towards. This is not what's going to make people productive. Following this advice is bad advice. First of all, it's Christmas. Most of your vendors are going to be closed. You're not going to communicate with them anyway. Your productivity is going to be down because of that. You don't have 2 weeks where you can focus and get some work done, because most of the people you're going to have to interact with, and we have to interact with a lot of people. Programming is a communal activity. It's not a solo activity. All these people you're going to have to interact with, they're going to be off because they're not insane. So really that 2 weeks that you're working, you're going to frustrate yourself, you're going to be annoyed that you're missing out on seeing your friends and your family, and you're going to come back to work in January and you're already going to be burnt out. Everybody else is going to come back after 2 weeks rest and they're going to be ready to just get at it. Thankfully, our whole industry doesn't think this way. This is a quote from Jason Fried, the co-founder of Basecamp. He says, workaholics aren't heroes. They don't save the day, they just use it up. I love that. It means just because you're sitting at your desk doesn't mean you're productive. Just because somebody is there 12, 14 hours every day doesn't mean they're productive. They're just using time. They could just be forcing themselves just to sit there and are not actually contributing to the company goals at all. From my own personal experience, so I used to work for So I used to work for an ed tech company. I had a 2-hour commute each way every day. So I was already burning out just on the commute time. So 2-hour commute each way every day to come sit in this office and work on was probably the worst code base I've ever encountered. Wonderful team, horrible code. So we had mountains of technical debt, very difficult deadlines. It was really, every day seemed to be crunch day. Every day was a real challenge to get anything done. And I wasn't looking after mental health. I wasn't looking after myself. I was coming in, and one day I came into work and I spent 8 hours staring at that. This is my actual literal terminal, by the way. Isn't Unicorn cute? I just came into work, I opened my computer, I opened my terminal, and I stared at that blinking freaking cursor for 8 hours. I didn't get up to get a drink, I didn't go to the bathroom, I didn't get lunch. I just sat there willing myself to be able to contribute. But I was so burned out that I just couldn't even get any words formed in my head down to my fingers to type out. But I had been conditioned so much that if I wasn't sat in that seat, If I wasn't present within my team, then I was letting them down. I wasn't contributing. That I wasn't being productive. If anything, I was a detriment to the team. I'm sitting there for 8 hours. I should be like picking up some Jira tickets. I'm contributing to that sprint. When actually all I was doing was ensuring that all our sprint figures would be off because our actual productivity would be down because I did nothing for 8 hours. I wasn't being successful. I wasn't contributing to the company at all. All I was doing is just burning spoons and making myself more unwell. And this is this idea, again, of like the shallow work. I've been so conditioned that I needed to be seen to be productive all of the time that I was actually hitting the point where no longer was I just being damaging to myself. I was actually being damaging to the team's productivity, to the company's goals. Okay, so what can we do then to help ourselves focus more on deep work? So there's a bunch of different techniques out there. So this one is Pomodoro. So essentially it's a kitchen timer. So you set the timer for like 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever you want to set it for. And then once the timer goes off, you give yourself a 5-minute break. So you set the timer for 5 minutes, it goes off again, you set the timer back for 15 minutes or 20 minutes, wherever your work session is going to be, and you work in that way. And the idea behind it is that you're breaking your work down into these 15, 20-minute chunks with the knowledge that, very shortly you'll have a 5-minute break where you can go check Hacker News or you can read Twitter or whatever you want to do. Doesn't work for me. It takes me 15 minutes to figure out what freaking file I should have open in my editor. All I'm doing is building in like distractions to myself every 15 minutes. I've just finally figured out which part of the code I'm working on, and bing, and suddenly it's break time again, and I'm away from the code for 5 minutes, and I come back, and I'm like, okay, what was I doing again? I was on Hacker News. No, I was supposed to be on Twitter. No, I'm supposed to write this code, and yeah, Pomodoro does not work for me. So then we have getting things done. There's another really popular one. Essentially, it's a flow chart, and whenever a task comes in, you answer some questions about the task, you put it in different buckets, and if you're me, you generally forget that it exists at that point. Again, doesn't work for me because of the whole ordination. Getting tasks, into particular buckets, great, yes, I can do that part, but then there's nothing to remind me that I need to go and check these buckets again. The only bit I do take from this is the, can you do it in 2 minutes? I think that's wonderful advice. If a task comes in that you can do in 2 minutes, just do it. Don't stick it into a to-do list, don't put it into like a calendar, don't procrastinate on it, just get it done there and then. So normally I would say that's something I follow. I have to now qualify it with I try to follow, after one of my colleagues pulled me up last time I said that. So yeah, I try to follow the 2-minute rule. Okay, I love these. These are bullet journals, okay? Bullet journals are excellent. I have no idea if they work, but they look beautiful. Look at this stuff, like they're gorgeous. Is this person's like entire job? Is just to sit and make these really, really pretty notebooks? I can't imagine trying to like maintain my to-do list in one of these. I'd be like, okay, you know what? I'm going to get my color scheme nailed. I'm gonna go buy some new stationery. I need some I'm gonna need some new markers. It's gonna look gorgeous. And I would get nothing done. Like I wish I could use these. They are like the prettiest to-do lists I've ever seen. But I would just get so distracted by the actual coloring in of things and lovely penmanship on let's get this shit done. I could spend days just making that perfect, which unfortunately is not my job. So if anybody here uses a bullet journal successfully, I envy you so much. I really wish I could. They're so pretty. Doesn't work for me. Also, one thing I found out when researching this is they're no longer called bullet journals. Okay? They're now bujos. Like fucking J-Lo or like Kim Ye. I am really not cool enough to use bullet journals either. So next one is Eat the Frog. Weird title, I know. So Eat the Frog is essentially a method where you say you do your worst task first thing in the day. So the name comes from the fact if you eat a frog first thing in the morning, that's the worst thing that's going to happen to you today. So you schedule your worst task to do first thing. And this actually kind of works for me. As we'll see later on when we're talking about schedules and routines, that's when I'm most productive is first thing in the morning. So this is something I do tend to try and follow. And it's kind of what I want you to take from this talk is I'm talking about all these things and what doesn't work for me and bits that do work and things. And that's essentially what I'm trying to get across is like, it took me 34 years to kind of to figure out, okay, this stuff doesn't work and it's never going to work because my brain doesn't work that way. But this little bit works and that little bit works. So I'm going to take these little bits and I'm just going to try and use them instead. I'm no longer going to try and fit this like square of cube, or says cube, into a round hole. I'm going to take the bits that work for my brain and I'm going to use those bits. I'm not going to try and rewrite the way in which my brain works to fit some process. Instead, I'm going to devise a process that works for me. Because that's another thing about people with ADHD. We are really bad at organization. And most task managers, they're not built for that. They are designed to help you keep tasks in a particular order and get them completed. So that's never going to work for me. Organization becomes an unsustainable task because organizational systems work on linearity, importance, and time. 3 things that are controlled by your executive function. So any of these things that we're looking at, any of these kind of methods, I'm probably going to be able to use bits of it, and it's probably going to be the same for you. Even people who don't have ADHD, none of these systems are going to work perfectly. They've been written by somebody, and it's what works for them. So don't be afraid to take little bits of it and to change it around a bit and just devise a system that works for you. Don't try and fight sometimes your own mental processes. Sure, you sometimes want to develop good routines and good behaviors, and that should be applauded. But recognize when something is going against your way of working, which is going against your nature, and do something different instead. For me, these are probably the best way for me to organize myself. They are very low tech, but they're very visual, they're tactile. I can very quickly create to-do. I can see all of my things I need to be working on right now. But like anything else, they have a flaw, because they tend to be stuck on my monitor at home, and I tend to spend about 60% of my time traveling. So, oops. Okay, so task systems is one thing we can do to help improve our focus. Probably the most important thing is working environment. So anybody who doesn't recognize the photo behind that slide there, that's actually Facebook's engineering floor. I'm finding it difficult to focus right now, knowing that's on the screen behind me. It's so busy. That just looks like a hellscape for me. I wouldn't be able to get anything done there. It looks noisy, it looks busy, there's so many visual distractions. That's not somewhere that, to me, looks like it's been designed for people to work. That's somewhere, to me, that looks like it's been designed to maximize the floor space to fit as many developers in as possible, because, floor space is really friggin' expensive in California. And it's not something this is not new advice. We've known this for a while. Here's a quote from Dr. Nicole Millard, who's a BT futurologist. BT is a British telecom. For anybody here who's not familiar with British Telecom, it was like a publicly funded organization in the UK that then gets sold off cheap to a private company. Thank you, Margaret Thatcher. It says, the trouble with open plan offices is they're a one-size-fits-all model which actually fits nobody. So we've known this information for a while, that open plan offices don't work. In fact, I've got some stats here. I'm just going to read for you very quickly. So these are different surveys that have been conducted. Steelcase surveyed 1,000 plus people who work in open plan offices. So they found out that 95% of them said that privacy was important. 41% felt they had privacy. So the vast majority of staff said that privacy was important for them to complete their tasks. Less than half felt that they had it. 31% of people said they had to leave the office to get work done. That's just insane. We spend all this money to create these office spaces, and people have to leave them to work. They would lose an average of 86 minutes a day to small interruptions. That's not like to a meeting, or that's like the 15 minutes somebody just pops along, taps you on the shoulder and goes, hey, about this thing, or hey, did you get my email? Love that one. These very small micro interruptions that you get every day actually would accumulate to you to lose 86 minutes a day. Now, if you take that 86 minutes a day and you blow it up over a normal working year, that's 10 working weeks. 2.5 months we lose every year to these micro interruptions. Canada Life said that if you work in an open plan office, you are 70% more likely to take sick days. 70% more likely. Now, we all kind of know where that is. There's always that one person who insists on coming into work, when they're ill, when they have a cold or a flu, and gives it around the entire office. Again, actually probably not that person's fault. It's part of this conditioning that we need to be there, we need to be seen to be productive. It doesn't even matter really how many people are in the office. If you've only got 2 people in the office, your likelihood of taking a sick day increases by 50%. Queen's University of Technology's Institute of Health and Biomedical Innovation found that open plan offices increase, they've got 90% higher levels of stress, conflict, and high blood pressure. Cornell University psychologists, this is interesting. They didn't even put these people into an open plan office. They just played the noise from an open plan office to them for 3 hours and monitored what happened. Over that 3-hour period of just listening to the noise from an open plan office, their adrenaline spiked. That's your fight or flight response, just from the noise of being in one of those offices. They were also 50% less likely to make ergonomic adjustments to their chairs. So they were so distracted by the noise, they didn't even realize the chair they were sitting on was uncomfortable. And this is not new. Like, we've been using open plan offices for a while. 1896, this is Riverside Press in Cambridge. 1900, the Long Room in Wellington. 1902, this is an architecture and design studio in New York City. 1939, this is probably the only open plan office I would agree to work in. This is Frank Lloyd Wright. He called it the Cathedral of Work. You know, it's meant to represent a forest with lots of natural light coming through the canopy. Every one of those desks was individually designed to maximize the amount of space while also allowing for free movement between departments. So if you're thinking of like, okay, we're going to move to an open plan office, if you're not willing to put in this level of work, then please just don't. Because a lot of people tried to copy it, and normally whenever they copy things, they just fuck it up, let's be honest. It's never as good as the original. 1968, Henry Miller came up with the Action Office. Well, he claims to come up with the Action Office. Actually, he copied it from a German firm who came up with it in 1965. They called it Bürolandschaft, or office landscaping. The idea here is that you have modular furniture that you can adjust depending upon your needs at the time. So if you need a small meeting area, or you need some more desks, or you need whatever, you can just take these bits apart, reassemble in different orders, get new types of pods. They're pretty common now. We've all seen them. You know, every office is the same IKEA cutout. And they're okay. They're better than what we had before. They're not quite a cubicle farm. Still not great. Even the company I work for, Nexmo. So we did a major redesign of our office recently, and it's nice. It's lovely. You know, we have these great areas where we can hold meetings or meetups. You know, we've got little cubby holes for people to hide in. Even areas that are supposed to be noisy, like where we hold our stand-ups. You know, we've got noise damping curtains and stuff around it. You know, an interesting thing on this is the tiling. The multicolored tiles are supposed to indicate noisy areas, and the grey tiles should be quiet areas. So we've done all this lovely work to try and make somewhere which is pleasant for people to work in, and then we plunk all the engineers down in little rows in an open plan office again. You know, which is just distracting and it's difficult to work in. Actually, my favorite office is this one. You know, this is my office at home. No, okay, so I don't get football tournaments, and I don't have a fridge full of Sprite and cold pizza. But what I do have is the ability to control my environment. You know, if it's too hot, I can open a window. If it's too cold, I can turn on the heating. You know, if the light through the window is distracting me, I can close the curtains. If I want to dance about in my zombie slippers, I can. You know, these are all things that I can't do in an open plan office. Well, I probably could do that only once. You know, so that's, if anybody's worked in an office before where even a small distraction, you know, the office is too hot. You know, somebody refuses to turn the thermostat down. Or the opposite, somebody refuses to close a window and you're too cold. You know, what seems like a very minor thing is enough to distract you from being able to get into focus. You know, you're being so much distracted by what is an external stimulus that you cannot focus on what's important. So control your environment. The next thing then is routine. So that's what I was discussing earlier about you know, eat the frog works for me, and it works for me because I'm most productive in the mornings. Now this has taken a lot of trial and error to find what works for me, and this won't work for everybody. But I'm most productive really early. You know, so 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. is when I'm most productive. And then 8 a.m. is when the worst of the world starts to wake up. You know, my partner's getting ready for work, the flat gets noisy again. I tried to just work through it before, but I've realized that I'm not going to focus, so I don't force it. Coming 8 a.m., I stop work for a couple of hours. You know, I maybe catch up on some reading. You know, I'll do something else. And then 10 a.m., people are now at work, things start to quieten down again, I do some more work, and by 3 o'clock, I'm pretty much done for the day. You know, I don't have any focus left to give. So again, rather than trying to force it and to work 3 to 5 p.m. because, you know, that's what society says that I should do, I just stop at 3 and I go and do something else. I'll go to the gym, I'll go see some friends, I'll relax, whatever I want to do, but that's my work day over. And I have to kind of try and stick to this routine because of the whole dopamine thing we talked about earlier. I don't have that chemical to help me. You know, if I want to create good habits and good routines, and it's where I need to be really, really strict with myself and try to ensure that I'm staying to that routine as much as I can, because I won't have the chemical fix to help reinforce it. And it's difficult for somebody in my line of work because I travel a lot. This was, I put this slide together maybe 6 months ago. This was like 8 months worth of travel. Since then I need to add like Colombia, Vietnam, Netherlands, Switzerland, and Ukraine to that. So trying to keep a routine together like this whenever you don't know where in the world you're about to wake up in is difficult, but you try to find your way. So you need to be able to work from wherever you want to work from, and you need to be able to work whenever you want to work. And people are going to go, my boss is never going to allow that, because management is basically just like a big clock in, clock. That's all they're there for, is to make sure bums are in seats, right? No, good management shouldn't be about that. Good management isn't about walking around and seeing if people are in their offices. It's about creating conditions for people to do their best work. If your manager is somebody who is they don't really care about your output, they just care that your bum is in that seat from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. or whatever your office hours are, they're not a very good manager, I'm afraid. It's other things as well. Managers, there's so many simple things they miss out on that make, which really set you up much better for success. It always amuses me whenever I see job adverts, that say, you'll get the latest MacBook. Thanks. That's like seeing a job advert for a fireman saying, you'll get hoses. It's like, good equipment is the basic thing that I need in order to do my job. This shouldn't be a perk of the job. This should just be a requisite of actually starting. And unfortunately, the reason that there is in some job adverts is because some companies do. They give out shit equipment, or they argue about extra monitors and stuff. You're paying all this money to recruit really good people. You're probably paying them good salaries as well. Don't nickel and dime them over an extra monitor. Also, you can have issues with managing up. So I had I was working for another ed tech company actually, and our CEO at the time, it was a product company. So our CEO used to phone up the developers and put in product requests. Would skip the entire product development lifecycle. He's not finding tickets for it. He's not going through the product managers. He's phoning a developer directly and going, I want you to make this change to this page. Now, if anybody who's worked in any kind of project management, that's nightmarish, because those aren't getting tracked anywhere. It's going to throw off all your stats. You don't know what people are working on. It's going to throw off your Q&A because it's not getting added to their workloads. It's a nightmare. So you go and you try and speak to the CEO and you try to explain them, you're interrupting developers, you're throwing off all our stats, you're interrupting their focus. And unfortunately, a lot of times they're just going to go, don't care. Their CEO, it's their company, they review them as their developers. If they want to speak to the developers, they're going to phone the developers. So in that situation, I got the developers together and I went, okay, so these phones on your desks, do you use them to call other departments? No. It was a small company. If you wanted to speak to somebody in a different department, you got up and you walk over and you speak to them. I was like, okay, so do you use them for personal calls? Do your family call it? Do you call your family? And they're like, dude, we've all got cell phones. Why would we have our family call us through the company switchboard? So I was like, okay, so you don't use them to call within the company. You don't use them to call any private calls. What do you use the phones for? They're like, well, sometimes the CEO calls us up and asks us to do shit. So I got a big ass box and I walked around every desk and I took the phone off the desk and I put it in the box and I put that box outside of the facilities room, and that was the problem solved. And that's what you should be looking at. A manager's job is not to be there to make sure people are sitting in their desks. It's to be there to ensure that they have all obstructions that you can possibly remove are removed, and anything that they need to focus and to do their job is provided. So we've got everybody now scattered all over the world, working from wherever they want to work and working whenever they want to work. So how do we communicate? Communication is a key thing for any kind of development teams. So we use Slack a lot in our office. I'm so glad that I was able to cancel that and edit message. This is our team's fully distributed, so this is actually a screenshot I took from our own Slack. They would have been so pissed off if I woke them up just to get a screen grab for a slide. But yeah, we use Slack for all communication. And the biggest change that you need to, whenever you're starting to use text-based communication, is the fact that it may not always be synchronous. You need to get used to being able to communicate in an async way. So sometimes you're going to ask a question of somebody in chat and they're not going to be online. It's either going to be the wrong time zone for them, or they're going to be away from their desk, they're going to be walking their dog, they're going to be doing something else. And you need to get into the mindset that just because you need an answer right now doesn't mean that person's going to be available to give that answer. We use some additional tools and things in Slack to help us. This is Geekbot, allows us to do our stand-ups in Slack, figure out what people are doing, so we don't need to be asking them every day. We use channels. We use an awful lot of channels. Just one or two. So by using channels, it means then that we create a channel per project or per product. So if somebody joins a project later on, they can just jump in the channel, and it'll help them then get up to speed with what was being done. I don't need to be in every channel all the time. Some of them I have muted. I just check in when I want to check in. So the final thing I want to talk about then is this idea of prior planning and preparation prevents piss poor performance. So I mentioned very briefly earlier about crunch. People who aren't aware of what crunch is, it's something that it's actually really used a lot in the computer games industry. Last one I heard about was Red Dead Redemption 2, who went into crunch mode for 3 weeks where they were working 100-hour weeks. 100 hours? Even if it's just for 3 weeks, there's no way that's sustainable. That's just a big nope for me. There's a huge backlash online about it. They came back saying, oh, it was only for 3 weeks, and it was totally volunteer based. It's yeah, sure. There was no repercussions if you didn't want to work the 100 hours a week. So I believe you. And it's not just this sounds unreasonable. The math backs it up. So this is your productivity over a regular 40-hour week. And sometimes you're okay, we really need to hit this deadline, so we're going to start working a few extra hours, and you bump everybody's hours up to 60. So this is your productivity over a 60-hour week. Over several 60-hour weeks. So you can see at the start, you're working 20 extra hours. Of course your productivity is going to be higher. But as you become more fatigued, your productivity starts to go down. So, once you hit the kind of 4-week mark, your productivity is actually starting to be less than what it was on a regular 40-hour week. And most people are okay, well, that's fine. We're going to run crunch, for a few weeks just to get over the line. So yeah, okay, our productivity will go down each week, but we'll still be more productive than we were working a 40-hour week. But what they don't take into effect is your error rate. So for error rates, I did a lot of research, and not in our industry, because there's not a lot of research being done on it. Instead, I researched into the medical industry and the military. So they've done a lot of research on how fatigue impacts your decision making and your error rates. Because obviously in those industries, it's a major factor. If you're fatigued while working in the medical industry, people are going to die. And if you're fatigued while working in the military, the wrong people are going to die. They've done a lot of time researching this. And what they found is even with a very small amount of fatigue, so a junior doctor working an 18-hour shift, whenever they come off that shift, they have the same they've got the same reduction in mental capacity as a drunk driver. 57% of junior doctors in the UK say they have had or have nearly had an accident on the way home after a long shift. So if we factor that in, this is your error rate. So our error rate was the yellow one at the bottom before. Now when we get sort of fatigued, it's up at the top. And we can see it very quickly spikes once you get over more than a couple of weeks worth of crunch time. Now it does appear to drop off quite significantly after that spike. That's not because your error rate goes down. That's because you're no longer writing as much code. So there's not as much code for you to have errors in. So let's say that each of these errors cost you 2-3 hours to go back and fix. So this is our productivity once we factor that in. So we're also, as well as our error rate, our technical debt is going to go up. Let's factor that in. We're probably not writing tests anymore. They're going to be the first thing to go. Let's factor that in. There's no documentation getting written either, so now anybody else who comes in has to work on the code as well. It's going to slow them down, so let's factor that in. And suddenly that 4 weeks that we had is now down to a little over 2. So with this, it's people go, okay, well, that's fine then. We'll do a week of crunch, and then, we'll pause. We'll do a week of normal, and we'll do a week of crunch. Doesn't work that way, unfortunately. What they did find in the computer games industry is for every week of crunch that you did, you then would need a subsequent 2 to 3 weeks recovery time afterwards. So hopefully you've picked up some stuff from this. Hopefully it's been a little bit useful. The main things I wanted you to take away is it's in order to gain focus, you're going to have to do a lot of experimentation with different different types of techniques to see what works for you. You're probably going to need to control your environment, so no more open offices. Let people work from where they want to work from. You're probably going to find the times that work best for you too. You know, let's don't try to force being productive in times where it's not going to happen, because all you're going to do is use up spoons and burn your wheels. And creativity isn't a faucet. You know, don't stress it if you sit down to write some code and it's just not happening. Sometimes the well is dry and you need to do something else to fill it back up again. So thank you very much for playing my talk. I'm not going to have time for questions. Also, I know mental health topics, it can be a little bit daunting sometimes to stick your hand up and ask anything. My Twitter DMs are open. I'm on Twitter as just Aaron Basset. If anybody wants to talk about anything to do with mental health or ADHD or anything around that, I'm more than happy to have a conversation through DMs too. So thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, also we have Speaker's Corner. You can take some rest on beanbags near this.
Unfortunately, I can't. I have to leave straight for the airport. Otherwise, I totally would. But yeah, if anybody wants to reach me, I'm very easy to find online, and I'm more than happy to talk about it anytime.
Great. Thank you.